The light cut through the black water 150 meters down. It was 2003. The Royal Norwegian Navy ROV was scanning a grid square in the North Sea, hunting for a wreck that shouldn't exist. The sonar ping had been vague, just a shadow on the seabed. But when the camera focused, the shadow resolved into steel. It wasn't a torpedo. It wasn't a shell casing. Sitting half buried in the silt, wedged against a piece of hull plating, was a small, cylindrical object. A Kodak film canister. Rusty, dented, sealed. Why was it there? The crew of this submarine had 4 minutes to live. They were sinking fast. You don't grab souvenirs when the ocean is crushing your lungs. You don't stop to screw the cap on a film canister unless it holds the only proof of who you are. This wasn't trash. This was a confession. This was U-864, the ghost U-boat, the only submarine in history to be killed by another submarine while both were fully submerged. And the film canister was the key to finding her. But to understand why that canister mattered, you have to go back to the start. Kiel, Germany, December 5th, 1944. The Reich is burning. The Russians are in the east. The Americans are in the west. Hitler is desperate. He needs Japan to keep fighting. He needs technology. He needs mercury, 65 tons of it. Liquid silver, toxic, deadly, enough to build thousands of tons of explosives. U-864 was a Type IXD-2, a monster, 87 meters long. She wasn't going to fight. She was a mule, a secret mule carrying the blueprints for the Me-262 jet fighter and enough mercury to poison the Atlantic. Her captain was Ralph Reimar Wolfram. He thought he was smart. He thought he could sneak past Britain. He was wrong. The mission was suicide, not because of the British Navy, but because of the cargo. 65 tons of mercury. It wasn't just heavy, it was volatile. The steel flasks were packed so tight in the keel that if the boat rolled too hard, they'd shift. If they shifted, the center of gravity would vanish. The U-boat would capsize in seconds. They called it a floating bomb, but Wolfram had no choice. He left Kiel on December 5th. For days later, near the island of Heligoland, disaster struck. It wasn't an enemy depth charge. It was his own torpedo. The U-864 was running submerged when she collided with the wreck of a sunken freighter. The impact was sickening, metal screaming against metal. The periscope was sheared off. The snorkel mast was bent. Wolfram surfaced, assessing the damage. The diesel engines were rattling like dying tractors. He had two choices, abort or limp back to Bergen, Norway, for repairs. He chose Bergen. It was the fatal mistake. British intelligence intercepted the signals. They knew a special cargo sub was in Norway. They didn't know what she carried, but they knew she had to die. Enter HMS Venturer, a British S-class submarine, smaller than the German Beast, older, but she had a secret weapon, Captain Jimmy Launders. Launders didn't fight by the book. He fought by math. While Wolfram was hiding in the fjords of Bergen, getting his engines fixed, Launders was sitting in the dark, waiting. It was February 9th, 1945. Wolfram finally left Bergen, trying to sneak out through the Fedge Islands. He was snorkeling, running on diesels to charge batteries, hugging the seabed to hide from Aztec. He thought he was invisible. He was wrong. Launders wasn't using his eyes. He was using his ears, and the ocean was about to get very loud. It was the sound that gave Wolfram away. Not a steady diesel hum, but a stuttering, uneven thrum like a dying heart. Launders heard it through his headphones. He didn't need sonar pings. He didn't need visual contact. He had the rhythm of U-864's broken engine burned into his brain. At 12:12 p.m. on February 9th, 1945, he ordered silence. No one breathed. The Venturer sank lower, hugging the seabed at 60 meters. Above them, 44 meters up, U-864 cruised obliviously, snorkeling just beneath the surface. She was running slow, heavy with mercury, her damaged engines groaning like an old man climbing stairs. Launders didn't have radar. He didn't have GPS. He had trigonometry and a stopwatch. He tracked the bearing changes, calculated speed, estimated depth. Then he did something no submarine commander had ever done before or since. He fired 4 torpedoes while submerged at another submerged target. Not in desperation, not by accident, by pure calculation. Each torpedo set to different depths and angles. A spread pattern, a net of steel in the dark. The first torpedo missed. The second curved wide. The third struck nothing but water. But the fourth found its mark. It hit U-864 amidships. The explosion wasn't loud. Underwater, sound travels differently. It was a deep, crushing thump that vibrated through the ocean floor. The mercury flasks ruptured instantly. Liquid death poured into the sea. The hull buckled. Lights died. Screams were swallowed by water. In 4 minutes, she was gone. All 73 men and 65 tons of poison vanished. For 58 years, no one knew exactly where, until a Norwegian fisherman snagged his nets on something strange. And until that film canister was found. The sea swallowed U-864 whole. No distress call. No survivors. No wreckage found. British Naval Command logged the kill, but without physical proof, it remained a footnote, a rumor. In Germany, families waited for letters that never came. The Kriegsmarine quietly scrubbed records. Wolfram's name vanished from official logs. The Mercury? Forgotten, buried under layers of bureaucracy and post-war chaos. For nearly 6 decades, the ghost U-boat was just that, a ghost. Fishermen avoided the area near Fedge Island. They spoke of snag nets, of strange metallic echoes on their sonar, of currents that pulled wrong. In 1998, a Norwegian trawler named Habris dragged up something impossible, a chunk of German submarine hull with mercury still inside. The flasks were intact, corroded, yes, but sealed. Scientists tested the sludge. It matched Nazi-era purity levels. This wasn't random debris. This was U-864. But where was the rest? Where was the wreck? The Norwegian government launched surveys, sonar grids, magnetometer sweeps. Nothing conclusive, just shadows, false positives. Until 2003. That's when the ROV pilot spotted it. Not the hull first, not the conning tower, but the film canister, wedged against the steel like a message in a bottle. Why did someone grab it? Why seal it? Because they knew this mission was cursed, and they wanted someone, someday, to know who died here. The film inside the canister was waterlogged, warped, nearly destroyed. But Norwegian conservators didn't give up. Frame by frame, they stabilized the emulsion, scanned it at ultra-high resolution, and what emerged was haunting. Not battle plans, not mercury manifests, just men, young men, smiling on the deck of U-864 in Kiel days before departure. One photo showed Wolfram handing out cigars, celebrating his promotion. Another showed 2 engineers arm in arm, grinning like schoolboys, holding steins of beer. There was even a shot of the mercury flasks being loaded, workers in gas masks giving thumbs up. Irony doesn't get darker. These weren't faceless Nazis. They were sons, brothers, husbands, men who wrote letters home promising to return by spring. The film proved the wreck's identity beyond doubt. The sub's hull number was visible in one background shot. But more than that, it humanized the tragedy. 73 lives. Not statistics, not enemy combatants, just sailors ordered to sail a poisoned ship through a war already lost. When the photos were declassified in 2005, German families wept. Some received their Father's faces for the first time in 60 years. The ghost U-boat had a crew again, but the mercury? That was still down there. 65 tons of it, leaking, seeping into the food chain, poisoning crabs, fish, plankton. The Norwegian government faced a nightmare. Leave it and risk ecological disaster, or raise it and risk detonating a toxic time bomb. The mercury didn't care about history. It didn't mourn the dead. It seeped, silently, relentlessly. By 2005, tests showed concentrations near the wreck were 10,000 times above safe levels. Crabs carried it in their shells. Fish absorbed it into their flesh. Plankton, tiny, invisible, became floating poison pills drifting toward Norway's richest fishing grounds. The Norwegian government faced a choice no one wanted. Leave the wreck and let the toxin spread, or attempt the most dangerous underwater salvage operation in peacetime history. Raising U-864 meant cutting into a corroded hull filled with volatile mercury under 150 meters of crushing pressure. One wrong move, a spark, a shift in silt, and the entire seabed could become a toxic cloud. Engineers proposed encasing the wreck in a giant sarcophagus, pouring concrete over it like Chernobyl. But currents would erode it. Mercury would still leak. The only real solution? Lift the entire wreck, all 1,600 tons of her, with the mercury still inside. It was madness. It was the only option. In 2017, after 12 years of planning, the operation began. A custom-built barge, Rockwater 2, floated above the ghost. Giant suction claws descended, not to recover bodies, not to recover film, but to recover poison. And as the first claw gripped the hull, something shifted. Something deep inside the wreck. Something that hadn't moved since February 9th, 1945. The claw held. Against all odds, against physics, against time. The corroded spine of U-864 didn't snap. The mercury didn't erupt. Not yet. Engineers on the Rockwater 2 exhaled. But this was only phase 1. Now came the impossible. Lifting 1,600 tons of waterlogged steel with 65 tons of liquid poison sloshing inside from 150 meters down without tilting more than 3 degrees. If the wreck rolled, the mercury would shift. The center of gravity would vanish. The entire structure could tear itself apart, or worse, rupture every flask at once. They used a system called parbuckling. Giant airbags and hydraulic jacks synchronized to rise in perfect unison. It took 18 days, hour by hour. Every groan of metal was monitored, every bubble analyzed, every shift in current logged. At night, the barge glowed like a floating city in the Arctic dark. Below, the ghost rose, slowly, silently, like a drowned god being pulled back into the world that killed it. On day 19, February 3rd, 2018, 5 days before the 73rd anniversary of her sinking, the keel of U-864 broke the surface. Fog hung low. No cheers, no celebration, only silence. Cranes locked her in place. Diversoir manoside, aspecting crack. And then they found something no one expected, tucked behind a torn bulkhead, still sealed. Another film canister. This canister wasn't for the Navy. It wasn't for history. It was for a wife. The label, barely legible under UV light, read, Für meine Frau, nicht öffnen vor 1950. For my wife, do not open before 1950. Whoever sealed it knew they wouldn't live to see peace. Knew the war would be over by then. Knew she'd still be waiting. Inside, not photos this time. Letters, dozens of them, wrapped in oilskin, tied with frayed twine. Written in pencil, ink would have bled if wet. Dated from December 1944 to February 8th, 1945. The night before they died. The handwriting belonged to Oberleutnant Carl Jessen, U-864's navigator. Kvietman, married 3 months before deployment. His letters weren't about Mercury or missions. They were about breakfasts, about her laugh, about the lilac tree outside their window in Hamburg. He wrote every day, even when the engines failed, even when the mercury fumes made him vomit. On February 8th, he wrote, "If you're reading this, I didn't make it home. Don't mourn me at the wall. Mourn me where the lilacs bloom. I'll be there in spring." He never mailed them. He hid them, hoping the sea would deliver what the right could not. When conservators handed copies to his widow's granddaughter in 2018, she wept for an hour. The lilac tree was still there, blooming every May, just like he promised. The letters were saved. The mercury was not. With U-864 now surfaced, the race against contamination turned critical. Engineers sealed every visible crack with underwater epoxy. Then came the sarcophagus, a custom-fabricated steel containment cell, 90 meters long, lined with titanium-coated barriers. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't meant to be. This was a tomb for poison. On March 17th, 2018, under armed guard and international observers, the wreck was lowered into its cage. Not in a museum, not on display. In a purpose-built concrete vault on the seabed, 3 kilometers from shore, buried under 12 meters of sand and rockfill. A modern burial mound. For metal, for memory, for mercury. No one cheered. No politicians gave speeches. The divers who welded the final seal simply saluted, then vanished into the mist. Above them, Jessen's lilac petals drifted in the current. Below, the mercury slept again. Encased, contained, but not gone. Never gone. Norway's Ministry of Environment installed permanent sensors. Temperature, pressure, HG leakage. Every ping monitored, every anomaly logged. The ghost U-boat was finally at rest, but her cargo, still ticking, still waiting, still part of the sea. And as the last ROV light faded from the vault, something glinted in the silt. Near the base of the containment wall, small, cylindrical, another film canister, or just a trick of the light. No one sent a diver back down. Some ghosts are better left sleeping. They buried the wreck. They sealed the poison. They preserved the letters. But they didn't kill the ghost. U-864 still breathes. In Norwegian environmental reports, in German family albums, in ocean current models that still track mercury dispersion. The containment vault? It's holding. For now. Sensors ping every 6 hours. All green. But engineers whisper about metal fatigue. about salt corrosion, about what happens when the last witness dies and the sea remembers. In Hamburg, Jessen's lilac tree blooms every spring. His granddaughter leaves a fresh letter beneath it each May. Not for him, for herself, to remember that war doesn't end with treaties. It ends with lilacs, with film canisters, with Mercury sleeping under concrete. The ghost U-boat taught Norway a brutal lesson. Some weapons outlive their wars. Some cargo never reaches port. And some men, they send love letters to the future, hoping someone will be there to read them. The North Sea keeps its secrets, but not all of them. Not anymore.